Well, g'day. Welcome to Northern Illawarra Uniting Church, our weekly sermon podcast. We're really glad to have you here with us. Wherever you're listening, it's great to have you here. This week is going to be a little bit strange because this week at our church service on Sunday mornings, we're going to be talking about our vision as a church. This is something that churches and many organizations do on a semi-regular basis, is talk about their vision. What are we about? What are we called to do? And I've been a member of churches where we've done that, and over the last couple of months, as I've come in new as the minister here, myself and the church council have sat down and prayed and talked about our vision for the church. So if you're not a part of our church and just listening to these teachings, you're welcome to listen in. There'll be some Bible teaching today. If you are, you do call Northern Illawarra Uniting Church your church home. Please listen in and feel free to reach out and let us know what's going on. As we talk about vision, though, I need to make a confession. To be honest with you, I get nervous talking about vision. Something about over-promising and under-delivering. I get nervous talking about vision because sometimes vision can be painful. It can be all about sharing a promise with someone about what we think God's doing, where we're going, but it never really lives up to that. Vision can be painful. Talking about vision can be painful, particularly when we talk about hope. Because any talk of hope is painful when it feels like we've seen disappointment. And I just want to be honest. There is a story out there, and maybe it's in our hearts too. It's a story of decline, a story of irrelevance, maybe. Our culture no longer finds its meaning, maybe if it ever did, in the Christian story. Our denomination, which is the Uniting Church, seems conflicted and confused and often talks about its own sense of decline. And our church right here at Northern Illawarra tells a story about great things that happened in the past. And even here, even in this place that we find so full of hope and joy and fellowship, there is still, on occasions, a narrative, a story of decline, of aging, of tiredness, a sense that maybe our best days are behind us. Now, even though I'm new to this church, I am no stranger to these conversations. A little secret, every denomination that I've been in, perhaps every denomination there is of the Christian faith, there is worry about decline and death. In my last church denomination, the Presbyterian Church in America, a group of pastors sat down and wrote a letter to the denomination and said that the church was deathly ill, talking about decline, about death. And so today, as we talk about the future of our church, this little church here on the corner of Point Street and the Princess Highway here in Bulli, I want to talk about vision in a realistic way. And the best way to do that is to read to you from the scriptures, because the scriptures are filled with truth-telling. They're not glossy brochures or pamphlets that are selling an image. I want to read to you from an ancient letter that was written to God's people, and to see that the fears that we have about decline are not new, but it's also a letter that tells us what God is really up to, even now, even here. And the letter I want to read to you is from an ancient prophet named Jeremiah. It's in chapter 29 of Jeremiah, and this part of Jeremiah's writings is a letter to exiles. You know what exiles are. They're expatriates, people who've been forced to leave their home and to live in another place. And this happened to Israel, to the nation of Judah, when it had been decimated by the empire of Babylon, carried off in 3 successive deportations. And now the majority of Israel, or the majority of Judah's elite, lived in a strange and hostile land called Babylon. And these exiles who had such strong traditions and strong history, well, they wanted to know what to do. And in exile, the people of Israel had lost their sense of themselves. They had lost their home, their temple, their traditions. As we can imagine, they kind of felt stuck. They felt lost, uncertain about what to do. All their rhythms of life, it was a disaster. They felt like everything had fallen apart. Nothing that they remembered, nothing that they treasured was present for them anymore. What would they do without all their home, their temple, their traditions? And so the passage I want to read to us, I just want you to think about it in that context. This is a letter written to people who feel like they are in decline and despair. This is from Jeremiah chapter 29. flashed on your screens. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. For thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, do not let your prophets and your diviners who are among you deceive you, and do not listen to the dreams that they dream. For it is a lie that they are prophesying to you in my name. I did not send them, declares the Lord. For thus says the Lord, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will visit you, and I will fulfill to you my promise and bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. That's Jeremiah 29, and there are some nice verses in there. A lot of verses that you can preach on, a lot of verses you can put onto coffee cups. But did you hear the whole thing, the context of this letter? This letter criticizes people that talk about vision too much. Remember this? Do not let your prophets and your diviners, your vision casters who are among you, deceive you. And do not listen to the dreams that they dream, for it is a lie that they are prophesying to you in my name. I did not send them, declares the Lord. No visions, or maybe just be careful with visions, because sometimes preachers, pastors, prophets can just be telling porkies. They can be telling lies. They can be casting a vision that's not true. Sometimes vision is just words. In Jeremiah's day, that meant false hope. There were people who were coming up with plans, strategies, hopes, schemes to get back to Israel, to go backwards, to recover their former glory. And Jeremiah calls them false prophets, peddling a false dream of going back to the way things were, or finding some new magical, pain-free new way forward. False prophets told the ancient Israelites, God's going to fix everything just the way you want it, just like he did in the olden days. Parting the Red Sea, knocking down the walls of Jericho, stuff like that. Sometimes this is what vision work can be. Telling people what they want to hear. Telling the grumpy folks that things could go back to the way they were if we just, preach differently or do something differently or pray differently. Or maybe we tell the idealistic folks that things can be quickly and radically fixed with the latest technique. A minister gets a new book in and says, this is the way we can do it. This is what's going to fix the church. And this kind of vision casting can just be a way of avoiding reality. And this is the kind of vision work, the kind of vision casting that I am skeptical of. But that doesn't mean there's no vision. God does have a vision to give. But God's vision is different from that kind of vision casting, because God's vision always embraces the present reality. It reminds us of our true identity before it begins to call us to a new endeavor. This is what God says to the people of Israel. This is the vision that God casts for them. God says, I know it's difficult where you are, but you are exactly where I want you, says God. I know exile is difficult and disorienting, but I'm doing a work in you and through you in exile, right where you are, right in the place that feels uncomfortable, confusing, disappointing, discouraging. That's precisely where God feels like he can do his work. It's no mistake, says God, where you are. Did you hear even the language? It slightly says, he says, I sent you into exile. You're there because of my will, my choices, my work, says God. And I know it was bad things that got you there, disobedience and destruction and punishment. But now you're here, says God. I'm not out of control. It's okay. So what does he tell them? In exile in Babylon, in the place that feels difficult and uncomfortable and disappointing, he tells them right there, build houses right where you are and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. If you want to do something hopeful, if you want to do something that fulfills the vision of God, plant a garden right where you are. He goes on, take wives and have sons and daughters. You settle down, multiply there, and do not decrease. Do not hold back, but put roots down. Dig in, not into an imagined future or some remembered past, but in the present moment. Invest in homes, in families, in life here. And Jeremiah goes on to say, seek the well-being of the place you are right now. The place of Babylon, the place of Bula, the place of wherever they were, what time that was, 600 BC. Seek the well-being of the place you are right now in 2021, because your welfare is wrapped up in the welfare of this city, this place, this time, this city. Because this is where life is happening and this is where God is working. In other words, get to work right here because God is doing a work right here. If God can work in exile, thousands of miles from home, in a completely alien environment, when all the patterns, temples, and traditions are gone, then God can do a work in our church right here and right now, because God's not discouraged, God's not done. Any vision needs to embrace our reality right now, not in fear or denial, but with conviction that God is at work. Because something happens in exile, in the disappointing, discouraging, difficult present reality. Something that can only happen in exile. As beautiful and painful as exile is, it's beautiful because in exile you don't know what to do. All the old plans, all the old tools, all the old strategies failed. You don't know what to do, so you start to focus on a more difficult and deeper question. Who you are. That's the question that we ask of ourselves in exile. Not what to do, because who knows what to do. But the deeper question, who are we? Who are we in God? Who has God called us to be? Did you hear the words of Jeremiah right at the end? God says through Jeremiah, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with what? All your heart. When you do that gut check, that heart check, that life check, and say, God, who are we before you? It's a heart matter. Our call, whatever we're called to do, has to come deep from within who we are, a place of hope and a place of need. Deep calls to deep. We need to connect to our deepest calling, our identity as children of God. Because when you know who you are, you can figure out what to do, no matter where you are. Hear that again? When you remember who you are, you'll know what to do, no matter where you are. Who we are as God's people, deep down in our heart, comes before what we do. And so today, when we talk about vision, I don't want to talk about strategy or plans or grand schemes. You know, so often people say to me, oh, you've come from America. Why don't you bring these great things that happen in America and bring them here? I'll tell you what, I'm not going to do that because things in America aren't that great and aren't that brilliant. People are struggling there as well. And I don't have wisdom to give to this present moment. What I really want to say is not that we have a brilliant strategic plan or a grand vision. We're in uncharted territory here. What I want to do is recast, remember to talk about our identity, the things that we're really committed to. And what I'm going to talk about today, I want to share 5 commitments, is we're not talking about made up words or slogans. This is not marketing. This is not a to-do list. These are commitments that simply recognize what we already care about. These are postures that I have seen, that we have seen, that are already in this church. And I believe we need to name them, fan them into flame, and ask God to use these passions, being not people we're not pretending to be someone else, but being who we are, getting to our heart of the matter. You know, I joined this church along with my family 5 months ago, and in that time, despite COVID and despite everything, I have come to love this church because we have felt so loved by this church. You walk into this church and you feel the warmth. You just do. And that's not true for every church. The other thing I notice is that you come into this place and you feel a sense of powerful prayer. I'll just tell you, in your worship services, when lay people in this church get up to pray, you can feel the wisdom and the power of those prayers. When in our church council meetings or any group meetings that happen, when people say, let's turn to pray, you feel that it's coming from a place that people know that prayer works. Perhaps prayer is the only thing that works. But I've also seen some other commitments, and that's kind of what I want to name today. Over the last few months, our church counselors sat down and talked together about the things that we think are true about us that we want to invest in. And the first is this. I'll put it up on the screen briefly. The first commitment I see, that we see, is building on the firm foundation of Christ's community and love at Northern Illawarra Uniting Church, while creating a path for newcomers to enter and grow. We're a church that has a deep love for one another. You feel it. And we have a firm foundation with deep roots. We share a rich heritage of scripture, mission, worship music. We've made bold decisions as a church for the sake of mission. Rob, Nance, and Bob Smith have shared some wonderful histories, and I've heard from some of you beautiful stories about this church's bold and faithful history. I've joined together and I've heard people talk about old hymns and new songs and favorite songs, and here's good news. As a church planter reaching younger families in my past calling, I learned that many in younger generations are looking for exactly that, a worship experience that allows for awe and peace and beauty and authentic community. It's not rocket science. It's not bells and whistles. It's the kind of community that this church already is striving to be. And I've also learned that many people who are not Christians, people who are seeking, people who are unconvinced about the Christian faith, are more interested than ever in deeper roots of tradition. And many people are hungry for the kind of community that we celebrate here. In a chaotic and uncertain world, many people feel rootless. And we can invite them into the great rhythms of worship and the Christian life. We can bring them under the umbrella of care in this community. In some ways, our best way forward into the future is to lean into our roots from the past with greater confidence, embracing the great hymns, old and new, using the great liturgies of communion and welcome, using even the building that we're in right here. Here's the thing about roots. If you tend to roots, then fruit grows. But by the same token, if you just let the roots grow untended, then they get out of control. They block entry. And the same is true with tradition. If you tend to tradition and make sure it's living and vibrant, then new fruit can grow out of that. But if you just sort of blindly or without questioning just allow traditions and habits to form, they end up blocking the entryway. They trip people up. They strangle new growth. And so while we are committed to our roots, to our foundations, to the existing community here, we're also committed to helping people navigating those traditions, entering our community, experiencing this church as a living spiritual reality into which their voice can be added as well. This is going to be honest. Our church has a heart for welcoming. I've felt it. I've seen it. You can smell it in this place. This church has a heart for welcoming, but we have lost some of the habits of welcoming. And we just need to cut back a few roots here and there, freshen up the place to make sure that the path is clear for people who are coming to seek faith. These ancient words of worship can still speak today, but it can't be an insider conversation. The language of baptism, of communion, of the gospel must be spoken in a way that the curious and the unconvinced can hear and understand. We need to rediscover the possibilities of Sunday worship, our Bible studies, our Friday night gathering as a place for people to hear the gospel for the first time, or the first time in a long time. I want to encourage welcomers. This can sometimes just be seen as a throwaway responsibility to stand at the door and let people in. But in many ways, the people who stand at the front door are the people who are the face of the church and say, welcome in. It's been a big step for you to get here. You're welcome. We need to use language in our worship that communicates what it's like to not believe, to let people know that we remember what it's like to be new to the church, what it's new to be new to faith. We need to start talking to people as though non-Christians, non-believers, the unconvinced are already here in our midst. And when we start to do that, those folks will start to be here. So that's our first commitment, to build on the foundation of love, but to open up entryways for new people. Our second commitment is this, and this one has come deep from the heart: the welcome and inclusion of younger families into our community while building intergenerational connection. You know, we need to do this. We need to make this a priority. As I sat and talked with almost everybody in this church, I said to them, what do you hope for this church? And almost every single person said, we don't know how to do it, but we need young families back. And I think we're not against that. I think we're discouraged. I think we feel like we're disempowered from doing that. But I bring my 7-year-old son along to church, and he's coming to know this community and feels the love here already. Alan in our church has been so gracious to bring Lawrence under his wing and help him to ring the bell in the mornings. We need to make the best spaces available for children and families. And like I said, this is a heavy lift for us as a church. But that's why we don't have a strategy yet. What we do need to name is our commitment to it. That this is who God has called us to be. And God is the God of the how. All right, our third commitment, that we be a community that includes both advantaged and disadvantaged members of our community. Listen, as I've started to pastor here in this area, there are two things that I've discovered so quickly about our community. One, that we are surrounded by some of the most incredible wealth and natural beauty that is anywhere in the world. And secondly, this community is filled with people in real pain and distress. People with mental illness, people with family trauma, people who've experienced and are perhaps experiencing right now domestic violence, and refugees, and loneliness. These things are real in our communities. This church is committed to walking towards trauma and not away from it. That's why we put on our sign at the front door, real people, real faith, because this is not a church that's interested in putting on masks. We want to be real with our own pain, but we also want to name it for other people as well. That's why this church, as hard a lift as it's been, has been so committed to these Friday night community dinners. The people that this church reaches. I mean, we could lock our doors and just be good, tidy people who worship. But that's not what this church has been. We are a church that chooses trouble, that moves towards trauma. But here's my question for us. We are committed to that, but can we allow those with struggles to move towards us as well? Not just to share with them resources and help, but to actually invite them more deeply into our community so that their troubles and struggles become our struggles and troubles. What does it say in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 when Paul talks about the church as the body of Christ? He says, in this body, when one person suffers, everyone suffers. When one person is honored, all rejoice together. Friends, that is our calling as a church. That's our commitment as a church. And again, we don't know how to do this. I'll be honest, we don't know how to do this well, but are we committed to it? I think we are. Our fourth commitment is simple. It's It's close to my heart. I know it's close to your heart as well. We're committed to gospel preaching and biblical teaching in the best evangelical uniting church tradition. We're going to preach our little hearts out. Myself, our lay preachers, we're going to lift up the resurrected Jesus, hold out radical grace for everyone, proclaim the one-way love of Jesus who affirms women, binds up the brokenhearted, and offers second, third, fourth, and 100th chances to sinners. Each week we're going to really invest in Bible studies for believers and for those who are seeking. We're going to preach faithfully, not just from the lectionary, but we're going to preach ways that speak deep to people's hearts. I love how Sandy in our church went around last week handing out Bible notes to people. That's who we're going to be, and that's what we're going to keep being as a church. And finally, this final commitment that I just love as well. We're committed to strengthening our partnerships with Need-A-Feed as a commitment to the flourishing of Northern Illawarra. This one's real specific, I know, but it's a crucial one. God has put us into a providential relationship with Need-A-Feed, which is one of the most recognizable and respected organizations in Northern Illawarra, caring for people who are in need. I'll be honest, as I looked at the church from afar, when I was thinking about feeling my sense of call here, the work that you already do with Need-A-Feed to care for those who are in need is what drew me back to the church. So I'm hoping that we as a church can only double down and strengthen that relationship, because in partnership with them, we can faithfully serve and help the flourishing of Northern Illawarra. It's what we already do. Let's keep doing it. As we do these things, these 5 commitments, I think we'll discover that the promise of God that we read today is true. Not that we have plans, not that we have strategies, but that God does. What does he say? For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you and to give me a future and a hope. Friends, that's our prayer, and that is God's promise. Gracious God, would you take these commitments and stir them up in us? May they be a creative, bubbling, fermenting place that throws up new ideas for things to try, things to experiment, and things to do. Lord, this church is beloved of you. You have called us, not to some return to the past, but living through who we are into the future that you have promised. Lord, I'm so hopeful about that. Not because of our abilities, but because of your faithfulness and promise. Help us to be true to who we are, to seek you with all our hearts, and to find you. And along with you, find those who are also looking. We pray this in Jesus' name, and all God's people said, Amen. Well, friends, have a great week and go with God. We'll see you next week.